for more insight on the human angle of this. Because again, there's the law enforcement, there's the guns, there's the politics. We want to talk about the heart also tonight. Dr. Jessi Gold joins us tonight. She is a psychiatrist based in St. Louis, Missouri. Dr. Gold, I'm so sorry that we're talking again on these terms, but this is really important, mental health. I know you have very strong sentiments when it comes to mental health, because that is often the first question. Was this person sick in some way? And anybody has to be sick in order to do this, it would seem. What is the role of mental health?
Thank you for asking me and having this conversation, and also being so vulnerable to continue to show your own emotions with this conversation, because none of us should be normalized to this experience. I think mental health becomes a topic of conversation because it's a good scapegoat, because movies tell people that people with mental illness are violent when the actual facts tell people that people with mental illness are more likely to be the victims than they are the perpetrators. And so that is an easy thing to explain to people, and people want an explanation. It's hard for people to understand that people do bad things, or people hate people, or access to guns is the problem, right? It's much easier for people to blame mental illness. So I do have strong opinions on this, because it affects people getting care. It affects people wanting diagnoses, and it's scary for my patients to feel like they might be thought of as violent because of this being the way that mental illness is viewed.
Understood. Yeah, and intervention early is key too. We recently had on an author, Mark Folman, who wrote a book called Trigger Points, and the thing that really stood out to me was an expert in his book said a mass shooting is not an event, it's a process. And many times, again, you don't want to stigmatize anybody, but as you know, many times there are signs, there usually are, and early intervention is key to really sort things out ahead of time. But in this case, we know in Texas, this man shot his grandmother before going to the school, according to the governor. His own grandmother, and she now has been confirmed dead. When someone attacks their own family first, and again, I know you don't want to speculate about any pathology here, but what does that tell us that someone would do that to a family member first?
You know, if I remember correctly, that's very similar to what happened in Newtown, Connecticut. And, you know, I was in medical school and waiting for patients to come that never came to be treated for gun violence during that time. And I think for me, what it tells you is that the person was not thinking clearly. What does that mean? It doesn't mean it's mental illness. It means there's anger, there's hate. If it was mental illness, it means that when you're in the mood to be impulsive, you shouldn't have access to a gun. And you certainly shouldn't have access to a gun that is an assault rifle, right? So lots of laws where people who have shown violent tendencies or who have been mentally ill and at risk to themselves, where we give laws that people can't have access to guns, or we can take their guns away, or we can say, like, you have to remove them from the house, people are saved, and that's really important.
Let me ask you about kids. They're going to bring in grief counselors to this school, but this is scary. And in millions of homes, what do you do every morning when you're getting the kids ready for school, when you're making them breakfast? You turn on the news. And a lot of them are going to see this tomorrow morning. Should parents talk to their kids about this, or just kind of hope they don't hear about it?
I wish we could hope kids didn't hear about it. I think it's important to have whatever conversation you feel comfortable as a parent having with a kid, but not to ignore it. I think we need to talk about it, because if you don't talk about it in the home, they might see it on TV. They might hear about it in school. They might hear about it from a friend. And it's important to be the person that answers those questions for your kid, that helps emotionally validate their experience, that talks about how it's hard and shouldn't be normal in this country for that to happen. I heard from a lot of parents today, because this happened right around school pickup, and people were really emotional about getting their own kids from school at the same time that this was happening. So it's going to be really hard for everyone, parents especially, and kids, and we need to be talking about it. And I think, you know, people who have experienced gun violence or are victims of past shootings and families who have interacted with that are also going to be triggered by this news. And I think it's important that we say, like, you can take a break. It doesn't make you a bad advocate or a bad human if you can't watch that stuff. It's just hard sometimes, and you have to take a break and take care of yourself.
That's the final thing I wanted to ask you about, Dr. Gold, is parents. Because last week, after the Buffalo attack, so many of the victims' families were saying, we will come back. And many of them were religious. I grew up in church, and a Bible verse kept sticking in my head that God did not give us a spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. But the truth is that, I mean, a lot of us are scared. You know, you're scared to send your kids out to the world. How do you manage it, you know, as parents or grandparents?
Yeah, again, thank you for being open about your own experience. I know it's probably especially hard for you with young kids. I think that we are allowed to have feelings. This should have a response to it. We have to give ourselves space to have those feelings and not just say, this is another day in America, I'm going to push it down and just deal with it. We need to feel. If feeling is anger, if feeling is sadness, if feeling is just confusion, whatever it is, give it space. Do what you need to do to cope. If that means that you have to turn off the TV, turn off the TV. If that means that you need to go for a run, go for a run. Whatever it looks like to you, you're allowed to both feel and cope and have emotions about this. And we should be talking about that openly.
Yeah. Dr. Jessi Gold, a psychiatrist who we know and trust and appreciate. Thank you so much for your time. And again, we will talk again in the future, hopefully not about such a heinous act. Thank you, Dr. Gold.
I hope so too.